Are you tired of CEOs telling you what to think, who to hate, and who to vote for? Well, welcome to the Rick Smith Show. We don't take orders from some boardroom, and we don't do focus groups or talking points. We don't work for them, and we never will. I'm Rick Smith, and I work for you. Join us daily at thericksmithshow.com and download the podcast and never miss a minute.
It's time for the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here. Today on the big program, lots to get to, lots to talk about. One story in particular jumped out at me, grabbed me right by the throat. Because look, we're in really unprecedented times. We're really in weird times. I look at the state of Tennessee. Tennessee, oh, weird. Remember, Tennessee, my impression of it, heavy notch in the Bible Belt. You know, the people who tell you how religious they are, how much they love them, some Jesus. I guess they didn't hear the Sermon on the Mount. Because look, I grew up Catholic Church. I grew up, peace and social justice. Grew up, feeding the hungry, shelter for the homeless. Taking care of the sick. Helping the poor. That was the tenets of Christianity. That's what I was drawn to. And I look at what the Republican Party stands for today, not that. And Tennessee right now, very bizarre. They have moved a piece of legislation that would make homelessness not just a crime, but it would make it a felony. Stop and think about this for a second. It would make it a felony if you had the audacity to try and find somewhere to sleep. I mean, am I missing something with the whole Christianity thing? Did I miss something in my reading? Did I miss something in going through the whole confirmation process as a child? Did I miss something in the scripture that said, help feed the hungry, but browbeat them? Help the sick, but not too much. Help find places for people to sleep, but maybe not. Did I miss this? Because I'm looking at Tennessee going, I don't understand, in the wealthiest country in the history of civilization and its wealthiest moment, how attacking the least among us somehow is in vogue. Attacking people who are struggling somehow is in vogue. And look, it happens in every single direction. Yesterday we talked about this as well. Tax time. Saying, hey, the billionaires are, they're getting away without paying their fair share of tax. But the billionaire guys say, no, it's the middle class that's not paying their fair share because we pay it all. And, this whole back and forth. And some of the responses I talked about yesterday, people sent me, were that this kind of pull yourself up by the bootstraps, believe in yourself, make a plan, work hard, this kind of stuff. And you go, well, what if you don't have bootstraps? Because there's an awful lot of invisible capital that we take for granted. And my kids, I'm explaining this to my kids as they're getting older, that there's a lot of invisible capital that they have that maybe others don't. And look, we're not rich by any stretch of the imagination. We're not. But there's certain things that benefits that they had that I clearly did not. And those are things to be grateful for. A stable place to live being one of them. That some people don't. It's an advantage. And it's these things that a lot of us take for granted that not everyone has. And I look at the mean-spiritedness of the policies that are coming out of the political right. And, I've had a number of people who've met me and go, I thought you'd have been a Republican. I go, no, I'm not that mean. I'm actually, when you get past the scowl and the unfriendly personality, I'm actually a very, very, very decent guy who thinks about people's well-being, not because I'm special, but because I've been there and I know what the struggles are and I want to help people because, well, it's what my mother would have wanted and it's the right thing to do. I don't know how we became, or a portion of us became this mean-spirited. And understand, it's one of my central core tenets. Lead your best life. That whole thing that I learned in school about life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. But also to reach a hand out and help others. And use government policy to help as well. To do things collectively through our government that we individually can't do, like end homelessness, not make it illegal. And here's the amazing thing. Look, there's part of me that goes, I think Republicans would celebrate. We ended homelessness. We gave them all homes in for-profit prisons. How twisted is that? Whereas I want to end homelessness by being creative and thinking of new ideas. Like I was watching a special not too long ago, and they were talking about, communities across the country who are doing what I said decades ago. Give people tiny little homes, like sheds. A place that'll have a bed, have a little place, just a little tiny place. Single people don't need much room, just a place to call their own, just a place to put their stuff, a place to, to call their own. And from there, they can branch out. And I'm thrilled to see people are doing that. Their communities doing that. But we are not, as a matter of national emergency, doing this. We're doing some of, I guess, the real work's being done on the mean-spirited side of things. And while our mainstream corporate-controlled media is fixated on how bad inflation is, and it is harming the working class of this country and needs to be addressed. It is harming the working poor and needs to be addressed. So do these problems that Republicans are finding solutions for. And I would argue their solutions are making things worse. See, one of my rules is always, if you're going to come up with a solution, it should solve more problems than it creates. I think that's a pretty good rule, don't you? That if we're going to come up with a solution to a problem, it should solve the problem, not create 1,000 more. Unlike our Republican friends who seem to go, no, hey, let's go looking for problems that really aren't problems and make things worse so we can think of other bad things to do to profit off of. Because ultimately, I'm looking at this with a very jaundiced eye. Because this isn't about helping people. This isn't about helping the homeless. This isn't about helping families find places to stay. This isn't about any of this. This is about punishing poor people. This is about punishing homeless people. This is about punishment and pain and suffering. That's what this is about. And of course, I'm sure there's going to be a profit motive. Because, we got all those prisons that, we release people out of. If we could charge them with felonies for being homeless, put some good jail time with that, maybe we can make some money. And maybe, hey, we could do something even dumber and we go, hey, 3 strikes and you're out. Catch you homeless 3 times. Well, how crazy is this? I mean, it's literally insane to me. And now look, I've seen other mean, draconian things. Like I've seen places where on park benches they put an armrest down the middle so people can't lay on the benches. I see them put spiky things along brick walls so people don't sit on them. All kinds of mean, sadistic kind of things because we don't want those people here. Those people are someone's children. Those people are someone's parents. And a lot of those people suffer from mental illness. A lot of those people are someone's loved one. I remember I was working downtown in Harrisburg, and there was a woman in her 50s. And she used to, every night, she would walk around with her cart all day long. And at night, she would take this tent and she would put it up against the wall and she would kind of wall herself off. And that's where she would sleep at night. No one ever bothered her. And every day her husband would come down and bring her things and try and take care of her. Clearly they had means, but she had severe mental problems. There was no way she was going to live with him. There was no way she was going to get any treatment. There was nothing that they could do. That's how she lived her life. I guess in Tennessee, we're going to lock her up and throw her in prison. She didn't bother anybody. Nobody. She lived her happiness. She lived her life. I guess in Tennessee, we're locking those people up. How sad is that? And is this the country that we are going to become? Is this the country? Is this who we are? I need the memo. I need to know it. Is this who we are now? I know we're going back to attacking, people who are different in every sort of way. And look, as I've said before, I don't understand a lot of all the other stuff going on. I don't understand the transgender thing. Probably never going to understand it. And I don't have to, because it's not my life. Maybe we should mind our own business and allow people to do their thing. But yet we've got people in government, in power positions, who told us that they want smaller, less intrusive government, only to then take the power that they're given and turn it against we the people. And at some point, I hope we rise up and throw these bums out and take control of our government, because that's the great thing about this country for the time being, that we still have the power to decide who represents us and the values that we move forward on. I don't think, at least I would hope, those people in Tennessee who call themselves God-fearing Christians drenched in the blood of Jesus, I don't think, or maybe Republican Jesus would be okay throwing someone in jail for being homeless. Maybe he would be. Just my thought. Love to hear yours. 1-866-416-RICK. 1-866-416-7425. You got a thought, question, comment? We want to hear it. Going to take a quick break right back after this. If you're just joining us, make sure you grab the podcast. Wherever you grab your podcasts, we are there, from iTunes to iHeart, Stitcher, Podbean, everywhere in between. Take it on the road with you. Never miss a moment. Quick break right back after this. Stick around. If you're a fan of the show, you've heard our Labor History in 2 segments, and you can hear them on the radio pretty much anywhere in the U.S. Labor history has never been more important than it is right now. So here's what we'd like you to do. Tell a teacher. Tell a teacher that labor history is important and that they can get digestible 2-minute lessons that are absolutely free. Free to download, free to use, free to share. Tell a teacher to go to thericksmithshow.com/history and help us put labor back where it belongs, in the classroom. You know, generations of American workers fought, bled, and died to build the American way of life. It's our job to keep their stories alive. Go tell a teacher that we're here to help them do just that. Find us at thericksmithshow.com/history today.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
One 866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. If you got a thought, question, comment, something on your mind, let's go to the phones. Got Jim from Chicago, listening on WCPT AM 820 there in the Windy City. Jim, what's on your mind, buddy?
Hey, Rick, love the show, and just a quick comment. To our friends on the other side, I think they hold all of us in contempt. I see that all the time, the way they act and the way they talk. But I just have a message for them. we're not coming for your husbands and your wives. We're not coming for your children. We're not coming for your homes or your money. We're not coming for anything that you have. All we want is a little version of what you have, a little piece of it. You've been screwing us forever. How about maybe we don't mind if you keep screwing us, but maybe instead of you getting 90% and us getting 10, maybe you get 75 and we get a little bit more. It's a shame, Rick, the way these people are. I don't know what to do. It's above my pay grade, but at some point in time, we need to reach out and just send these people a message, try and hurt them some way, the way they hurt us. Not in a violent way, but just give us a little bit more. Maybe make $10 million this year instead of 20. But just a thought. Appreciate your thought.
Thanks so much, Jim. I appreciate it. Good stuff. No, I mean, for me, this comes back down to very simple organizing. It's not about hurting anyone. It's about a simple distribution of wealth in ways that encourage. Look, I used to believe, and I still believe, that we can be a country where a meritocracy is possible. That if you do work hard, you do play by the rules, that you do get ahead. I had this conversation today with a friend who said, well, the problem is capitalism. And I go, somewhat, yeah. And I go, look, I'm a capitalist. I'll be honest about it. I think capitalism works, but there has to be guardrails. You cannot have a system where a winner takes all. You can't have monopolies. The end of capitalism, unfettered, free trade, laissez-faire capitalism is monopolies. And we're getting to that point. We're getting to the point where these huge conglomerates control not just industries, but control our government. That has to be broken up. And as I said yesterday, who's going to be this generation's trustbusters? Who's going to go in and break up these big corporations like we see in the meat packing industry? You got really 4 big companies that own 85% of the production. Upwards of 85% are done by 4 companies. And you wonder why? There seems to be there seems to be some collusion going on. I used to believe that, hey, competition is good. And Republicans believe this. Even Republican voters, when you ask them, they believe competition's good. Yes, because we've been told that. Problem is, not much in the way of competition. So for me, the idea of capitalism with guardrails, strong policy, strong labor unions to ensure that the wealth that workers create, they actually share in, kind of an important thing, which is why I'm happy today to say finally the Democratic Party got their heads out of their keisters. Something that I'll be honest, shocked it has taken this long. But evidently, there is now this isn't done yet, but it's coming. Potentially, there is going to be a ban on consultants and people who do union busting activities, on the side from the Democratic Party. So here's the thing. You can't, if you're going to be a Democrat and you're going to work for the Democratic Party and hold office and do those kind of things and be part of the machinery, you can't be a scab union buster. And I've been asking for years, why do you tolerate having, that's their day job. Why do we deal with those people? Why do you allow union busters around? Well, they're not. They're union avoidance lawyers. No, they're union busters. And look, I love the fact that Jennifer Abruzzo at the National Labor Relations Board, the general counsel there, is looking at making captive audience meetings the number one tool of union busters illegal. I'm thrilled that could possibly happen. But I think this is an important thing too, and I think Democrats need to do this. They need to stop just talking the talk, but actually walking the walk as well. And this is part of this. It's part of being the party of the working class. And this is where I've always been. Republicans are trying to be the party of workers in words. If you listen to Donald Trump talked about revitalizing manufacturing, bringing back the good old days. We're going to bring those factories back. And, people, especially in middle America, in rural areas where that one factory was the identity of the town, They pine for that. That was our community. That one industry, was the offshoot for all of the other industries, all of the other jobs. The companies, the grocery store, the hardware store, the restaurants, everything. Everything was because those 500 or 600 workers had really good paying jobs, and that income reverberated through the entire small town, and everybody benefited from it. It's gone now. It all dried up, and what you've got now is anger, poverty, depression, addiction, broken families. So what Trump was selling, people were going, hey, yeah, we want this. We want to revitalize our manufacturing. We want to bring those jobs back. Now, again, like a lot of the things that our three-card Monte sales folks on the right do, it's all about the show. It's all about, hey, look at the flash. There was no substance. There was no way he was bringing jobs back because he didn't have a plan. He thought he could go and shame people on Twitter and CEOs would care. They don't. They care about the bottom line. They care about their shareholders. They care about putting more money in their pocket. That's what they care about. They care about policy, of which he had no policy chops. And of course we didn't bring manufacturing back. Of course we lost more jobs. But they kept talking a good game, and this is the difference where I'm happy with Joe Biden so far, because he's actually saying, look, we're going to talk the talk on manufacturing. We're going to actually do the things we need to do, even if it's going to cost us a little bit, to bring those jobs back, to revitalize communities, and to do the things that Jim wants to do, redistribute wealth a little bit. Because what's one of the things that Joe Biden keeps saying? If we're going to help you, if we're going to bring some of these jobs back and we're going to help you, those are going to have to be union jobs. Those are going to have to be jobs with good family-sustaining wages, with health security, with retirement security, with job security. Have we heard a president talk like that before? No. And the thing that's weird to me is, and this is where you go, hey, Rick, we got a corporate-controlled media. I wonder why we've never seen a positive story about Joe Biden written at the F channel. Why haven't we seen very many positive stories about Joe Biden anywhere? Why is it always, the sky's falling, Joe Biden's approval ratings are bad, Joe Biden's bad? How come this is why we see all of these stories? Because they want him to fail. Because he's a threat to their system. The system that they've spent, billions of dollars building, that they've bought politicians for decades to create, that they've spent billions of dollars lobbying for. They're happy with their hands planted firmly on the wheel, driving this car right into the ditch. Because they're going to profit from it on both ends, as we're driving into the ditch and from the insurance after we crash into the hole. Heads they win, tails we lose. Until we wake up and realize that we still have the power to vote in this moment. And we could throw these bums out. My grandfather always said, if a rich guy's going to take a buck out of his pocket to tell you you don't need something, you better spend two to get it. So while all these people are spending all this time and energy and money and investment to tell me that Joe Biden's doing something bad, I'm looking at what he's doing. And I'll tell you, for working people, he's doing some pretty damn good stuff. And it's going to be helpful if we can help him, if we can help get more people into Congress to get some stuff actually passed. But as long as we keep buying the corporate-controlled line, it's going to be business as usual. Just my thoughts. Love to hear yours. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. If you missed any of the program, podcast, get that. You can get that at thericksmithshow.com as well. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1989. That was the day Edna Sauls and 38 women walked into the Virginia headquarters of the Pittston Coal Group, sat down in the lobby, and sang "We Shall Not Be Moved." Their occupation lasted 36 hours. The women were mostly relatives and friends of the 1,700 union miners on strike against Pittston. The women, when questioned by police and the media, refused to give up their names. They called themselves the Daughters of Mother Jones. Though Sauls had never worked in the mines, 6 of her brothers and 2 of her sisters had. She and many family members would sit down in front of Moss 3 preparation plant just weeks later. As the strike wore on, her husband Doug would be one of the union strikers who took over and occupied Pittston's Moss 3 plant later that fall. Sauls noted the high personal stakes at Pittston, stating, "My husband is 42 years old. He's worked in the mines for 24 years. Who is going to hire him for another job?" Sauls also rose to local fame during the strike when she began writing strike solidarity songs. One such song was "Let Me In," also referred to as the camo song for the strikers who wore camouflage. Sauls composed the song after she found a child crying whose striking grandfather had been jailed. In the song, the child asks to go to jail too. The daughters picketed Pittston offices twice a week and organized strike support that included housing, food drives, and fundraising. Their role inspired miners to occupy the mines and roads, persevere throughout the winter, and eventually win back health benefits. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
What is so supreme about the Supreme Court? I mean, besides being housed in an imposing marble building, being the final stop on America's judicial train, and having its 9 members look photogenically authoritarian in those full-body black robes. And yes, its existence is written into the Constitution, but so is Congress, and no one thinks of it as anything supreme. We 330 million Americans are told we must obey the law as defined by a half-dozen unelected lawyers on this court. Why should we democratic citizens do that? After all, these legalistic elites have no actual power to force their personal beliefs on us. There's no Supreme Court army. In fact, their sole source of power is one that is intangible, extremely fragile, and easily frittered away: public trust. We should go along with their rulings only if they appear to be fair and honest, not based on personal whim or partisan ideology, and not meant to extend plutocratic power over the people. As Justice Elena Kagan rightly put it, the only way we can get people to do what we think they should do is because people respect us. That's where the present majority of far right-wing appointees have failed so abjectly. Rather than meeting a lofty standard of judiciousness, all 6 have pulled the court down into the mire of crass Republican politics. They've corrupted the system and jiggered the law to decree that corporate campaign cash is free speech, that the state can take over women's bodies, that the Republican Party can unilaterally shut millions of voters out of America's voting booths, and so awful much more that enthrones the few over the many. This is Jim Hightower saying, respect? Trust? The Republican court is already down to 40% public approval rating, having surrendered its legitimacy to be a governing authority over us.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So like I said, I'm happy with what Joe Biden's done thus far. And he could do a lot more. Look, there's a lot more that needs to be done, especially on the inflation front. But that comes down to we need more people in the Senate, especially, more people in the House, and that's going to come down to election time. That's the reality. But I'm thrilled by the fact that talking about building back this country up, talking about using union labor to do it, talking about bringing manufacturing back, making sure that those are good, solid, family-sustaining jobs. I think it's a good thing. And the other day I saw a story with my friend Celeste Drake being quoted in the story saying, look, we're going to have opportunities to bring good jobs to the country, manufacturing jobs that are going to help us rebuild. And you know what? Again, those are going to be hopefully union jobs with those family sustaining wages, with that health security, with retirement security. And oh, by the way, going to help rebuild communities that have been left behind. And here to share some thoughts on the path forward in the rebuilding America idea, I've asked our good friend Scott Paul to come talk with us. Scott is the president of the Alliance for American Manufacturing, AmericanManufacturing.org, their website. Make sure you check that out. Scott, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, Rick, it's great to be with you tonight.
So I'm looking at this and I'm going, hey, I saw my friend Celeste Drake, the director of the Made in America at the White House Office of Management and Budget. I go, first, I love the fact that we have a Made in America office in the White House. I love that.
Yeah, it's you know what? It was a campaign promise, and it's more than symbolic, because what we've discovered, I think in our 15 years of work on this, is that if you don't have a point person in the White House that is kind of like shepherding and sherpaing your issue, you're not going to make a lot of progress. And so the president appointing Celeste Drake to this position, it's a big deal, because her job every day is to make sure that Buy America policies are being implemented and that the agencies are following the guidance and to follow up on that. And so I think that is crucially important in ensuring that the tax dollars that we're going to be investing in our nation over the next few years, the $1.2 trillion as part of that infrastructure and jobs package, are not only going to create construction jobs in America, which they most certainly will, but will also create manufacturing jobs because of these Buy America requirements, which says that, you know what, when we're going to build something, we're going to build it with American steel, American aluminum, and American manufactured goods. And for many programs, Rick, believe it or not, in the federal government, that's going to be a 180-degree change from what they were doing just a couple of years ago.
Yeah. Now for me, you look at the moment that we're in. We have some supply chain issues. Rebuilding manufacturing is going to certainly hopefully help with our supply chain issues. Going to create some jobs, and the other big part of this, hopefully reduce our reliance on China, which I think, and we've talked about this way too many times over the years. We're way too reliant on China and other countries for the things that we need.
We have discovered that in a very, very, very painful way. And I will be quick to add, we're going to rediscover that soon, because if you look at the cargo traffic around Shanghai now and all the container ships waiting to either pick up products or drop them off, we're gonna see shortages of things again, starting within a couple weeks as this piles up. And this is a real problem. And we're not talking about I can't find an Oreo or something like that. This is like semiconductors, other types of minerals that we need for to build electronics, like cobalt and magnesium and lithium for our batteries. These are things that where China has unfortunately built this manufacturing ecosystem, and we have virtually none of it, that will go into other sorts of computer and electronic goods that we take for granted here in the United States, and it's going to hit us again. And so I think the pandemic showed us, and then kind of the whiplash showed us, and now this is going to show us again why we need to reshore more than we are right now, because we are held hostage to this crazy system where these goods are like ping-ponging all over the world, and if one thing goes wrong, it ends up being a real cluster.
Yeah, I mean, and look, we just lived through this, and we're still. I argue that a big portion of the inflation that we're suffering right now, and look, for the working class of this country, the inflation is crushing. I argue a big part of it is the fact that we have allowed manufacturing to go overseas for the last 40 years. We, especially the last 22, that we've lost so much of our manufacturing prowess, that this is a big part of our inflation problem. And yet, I keep hearing, no, Rick, no, it's Joe Biden's fault. Joe Biden's the reason. And all I can come up with in this moment is, our corporate controlled media doesn't want to veer from the message that it's all Joe Biden's fault, because I think he's doing the right stuff. I think he's attacking the problem, but it's going to cost them money. It's going to cost them profits, because it's going to cost more to manufacture stuff here. It's going to cost more to do things the right way here in this country as opposed to somewhere like China. But I'm okay with that because we need to do it.
Yeah. You're exactly right. And none of this is Biden's fault, really. And I will say, I will share some blame for consumers and all this, because some of this is temporary, I will say, because we all shifted our spending patterns over the last 2 years from buying more services than goods to buying more goods than services now. That's going to change as people get out and about and do more and go out to restaurants more, travel more, spend more, out at concerts and things like that, because everything's opening up. So that will take care of itself. But consumers drove part of this demand. But Rick, you are absolutely right, is that we face, unfortunately, a retail sector and suppliers to the retail sector that are dominated by large corporations that don't have enough competition. And what happens when these companies don't have enough competition is that they get lazy and they start charging more. And if they have supply chains, and even as crazy as some of these kind of global supply chains are, they love them, because they're like, you know what? I am squeezing every last dollar out of this. If I can find it for a penny cheaper in this country, I'm going to do it. I'm going to look the other way if there are labor violations or if there's a lot of pollution, and I'm going to say it's not my problem if there's like a shipping problem or a political crisis or a natural disaster or something like that, and I'll make other people pay for it, even though I should have known this could happen, and my supply chain isn't resilient. And because it's built on the backs of the exploited and it's all over the world, it's not easy to turn this thing around and turn it and shape it into something that can create jobs in the United States and can conserve consumers well. Now, there are policies where we can both have more pain points for these companies when they're trying to do all of this bad behavior, both to American workers and abroad. And there are incentives that we can provide to bring some of this home too. And we need to find the right balance of that. I think that Congress, I think the administration, they're trying to work through all of that. But it is so clear, again, that it is necessary that we do this, because I don't think anybody likes prices bouncing up and down and up and down and up and down. They'd like some certainty. And if we have things closer to home, we'd have a lot more of that certainty, and we certainly have a lot more quality, and better paying jobs.
Yeah, no, again, I go back to I haven't seen that aggregate demand has gone way out of whack. I see corporate America going, hey, this is an opportunity to line our pockets. We're going to keep supplies low so we can keep prices high, so we can buy back our shares. We can pay off our CEOs a little bit more, and we can get a little bit of gouging where we can, while we can. I do expect the prices to come down over the next several months, but while they can, they're going to grab as much as they can. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show. We're with Scott Paul. Scott is the president of the Alliance for American Manufacturing, AmericanManufacturing.org, their website. Check that website out. We'll get links out on social media how you can check it out. And I understand today you had the opportunity to testify in front of the U.S. International Trade Commission. The heading of that hearing, distributional effects of trade and trade policy on U.S. workers. What'd you have to say?
Yeah. And I'm going to tell you why this is important, because this is another example. You talked about Celeste Drake before, and personnel of policy, right? I think we would agree that if you have good personnel, you're going to end up with better policy. And this is a case where Catherine Tai, who is the U.S. trade ambassador, who is by far the friendliest trade ambassador we've ever had to working people in this country, said to the U.S. International Trade Commission, which is an independent commission with political appointees and stock full of economists and trade experts, said, let's look at the impact that trade policy is having on working people in this country, and let's actually reach out to working people to find out how this is going. And so they held roundtables around the country. They did this virtually. I know a lot of people who participated in this from the labor movement, and they've been very, very solicitous of point of views because, Rick, there's a couple things that folks have missed for the last couple of decades. You haven't missed it. I would dare say I haven't missed it at all either, but that the policy decision makers have missed, and that's that the projections they get on the benefits of trade are flawed. They do not adequately cover the damage that is done, particularly to vulnerable communities and vulnerable populations in the United States. And there are so many examples of this. We can go back to NAFTA to think about the scenarios that it was going to create, somewhere between 100 and 200,000 American jobs, that it was going to improve our trade balance with Mexico. Oh, and that would bring more democracy, less of a migration issue, and an end to the narcotics trade, basically in Mexico. These were the promises of NAFTA. I don't know if you remember those, but I remember them because that's how this thing was sold. And then what actually happened was exactly the opposite. The Mexican economy crashed. The value of their peso went down. Our trade deficit went up. The auto parts industry migrated to Mexico. The migration issue with respect to Mexico did not change because wages were still dramatically suppressed in Mexico. And we ended up with a trade deficit just like 7 years after NAFTA that was 20 times higher than the worst case scenario that any of these commissions predicted would be possible. And so that's how screwed up our analysis of all of this has been. So the plea that I made to these commissioners is that you have to consider the fact that you are not adequately accounting for how difficult it is to get a community back on its feet once there are layoffs or once there has been a permanent plant closure. Because what's going to happen in the wake of this, and I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but what's going to happen in the wake of this is that factory is going to get replaced by maybe a dollar store or a Walmart or a warehouse or something else that's going to pay half the wages, that's going to have none of the benefits. And in turn, that's going to create a greater strain on public services. It's going to lower the tax base, and it's going to make all the other jobs in the community, there's going to be more competition for them. That's going to drive wages down, particularly if there's not a lot of union density.
Right.
And so it is going to be bad, 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 bad. And these analyses do not measure that adequately. It's all about, well, look at all these export opportunities, and that's going to support this many jobs. And so it's going to be a win-win for American workers and for American consumers. And it just has not panned out that way.
Yeah, it's going to be a win-win, except for all the people who are stuck in the frictional state of trying to replace the income from the jobs that they lost. Which is why, again, as my friend Bob Ney always reminds me, every one of these trade deals has trade adjustment assistance in it because they know people are going to lose jobs, and they're going to lose a lot of them, and there's going to be a lot of pain, especially for the working people at the bottom. And these deals are made to be this way, so that the folks at the top, they do wildly well, and we'll deal with those people at the bottom. And it shouldn't be this way. It shouldn't be, because all of the stuff they sell us that is going to be better for us never seems to pan out that way.
No, it doesn't. And I'm not picking on the ITC here because I want to commend them for digging into this. I think it's important because they haven't done this before. They haven't. I mean, this is hard work. But the ITC did an analysis of all the trade agreements that had been done basically under the Fast Track Trade Authority up until 2016. And they concluded that in sum, all of these trade agreements may have expanded the U.S. economy by 0.1% over that period of time. And that they may have provided a tariff cut benefit of somewhere around $11 to $13 billion a year. Okay, sounds like a big number. Consider the fact that their economy is $20 trillion. Okay, and that in a single year, to China alone, because of the import competition that our firms face, workers lose probably $37 billion a year in wage loss because of this downward pressure that's caused by China competition alone. So that more than outstrips any of the cheap T-shirt benefits that they're allegedly getting through these trade deals. And it's just stunning to me that these mistakes just kept being made. And so I'm happy that this analysis is occurring, that this outreach is occurring. The important thing is for the policy to change down the road. And that's got to be the next and inevitable step here.
Absolutely. Well, I'm going to say there weren't mistakes because you know my position on this. This stuff was meant to work exactly. Right. It's working perfectly as planned. What was sold to us isn't working, but the way it was meant to, it's working perfectly. So the question is now that we've had this, now that they have this information, now that there's no more plausible deniability, what do we do about it?
Yeah, and that's the commission. That's the question that a lot of these commissioners were asking as well. Is like, well, how can we proceed? How can we do things differently? And part of it has to do with doing more accurate analysis, but part of it is about the policy. And step number one is exactly as you say, to stop rigging the rules. And so if you have all of your advisors coming from industries like financial services, the rules are going to be written in a way that benefits financial services and harms everybody else, basically. So if you give working people a seat at the table and you make sure you have good personnel, people like Catherine Tai there as the U.S. trade ambassador, you're going to start to get better outcomes there. And if you're able to balance what I would call like the three pillars of trade policy, the fact that you do want to expand trade, that it can be good, number one, but you also have to have enforcement of your trade laws, which is number two. And then when necessary, and this is important because it will happen, although it should happen less than it does, is that you have to have the right kind of adjustment if there are shocks that occur.
Right.
And unfortunately, we do a really bad job. I mean, we expanded for the industries that have a seat at the table. We don't do enforcement the way we should. And our adjustment is terrible. And so many people are harmed permanently through this, and communities are harmed permanently through this. But our message is that there are ways to have a better approach, but it starts with giving working people a seat at the table.
There you go. And that's where we'll end it. Scott, I appreciate the time. Good on you. Good message. I hope some movement happens. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Rick. Thanks for having me on.
Good stuff. Our good friend Scott Paul. Make sure you check out his website, allianceforamericanmanufacturing.org, americanmanufacturing.org. He's the president of the Alliance for American Manufacturing. We'll get links out on social media, how you can check out the incredible work that they do there. Highly suggested. Going to take a quick break. If you're just joining us, make sure you grab the podcast. Never miss a moment of the program. Also want to hear your thoughts. 1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. This is The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1912. That was a day of tragedy for workers in the gold fields of Serbia. Gold miners by the Lena River in southeast Serbia worked under brutal conditions. The Lena Gold Mining Joint Stock Company ran the mining operation. The lucrative gold mines lined the pockets of shareholders, including Russian aristocrats and British industrialists. But the workers saw very little of the bounty they mined. They toiled for 16 hours a day for low wages. To make matters worse, workers were often paid in coupons they could cash in for food at the company store. The quality of the food was poor. A staggering 700 accidents occurred for every 1,000 workers in the mines. At the end of February, when one group of workers was given rancid meat, they had finally had enough. The workers walked out on strike. Soon they were joined by thousands of their comrades. They formed a strike committee and demanded an 8-hour day, 30% wage increase, better food, and improved workplace conditions. At first, the company agreed to talk to the workers, but negotiations went nowhere. Troops were called in and arrested the entire strike committee. Workers rallied to demand the release of their leaders. A crowd of 2,500 striking workers gathered. The troops fired into the unarmed crowd, wounding an estimated 500 workers and killing more than 250. As outraged workers across the country learned of the massacre, a wave of workers' strikes and protests swept throughout Russia. On May Day, 300,000 workers marched in the streets for the 8-hour day. The gold miners continued their strike throughout the summer, but to no avail. Thousands eventually left the gold fields to find less brutal work elsewhere.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
I listened to Scott, and the reality is working people have known how bad some of our trade deals are. And again, it's part of the reason I think it's the reason that Trump did so well in 2016, because working people understood how bad they were. And look, while Hillary was running around saying we're going to put a trade enforcement prosecutor into place, and I said, look, that's a good idea. We should have probably done that years ago. It still wasn't the vision that Trump was peddling. This idea that we're going to bring it all back and we're going to recreate the 50s and it's going to be the golden age again. Only problem, didn't really have a plan for it. Screwy stuff. Let's go to the phones. Got Alice on line 1. Alice, how are you today?
I'm good. How you doing?
I'm good. What's on your mind?
Well, the thing about the right wing is there are facts, there are opinions, and there's wishing. And most of the time, they go by wishing. And they don't go by facts, and sometimes they go by opinions. And wishing and opinions aren't going to get you too far when you're trying to cause needed change.
Yeah, but they don't want good change. They want to destroy things. I mean, I look at right now the current Republican parties. They're about destroying the 20th century.
I know. It's ridiculous. You were talking about Tennessee. I have she's been downgraded to an acquaintance now. Used to be my very best friend. She and her husband had moved to Tennessee about 20 years ago, and I talked to her about 6 months ago, and she was like La La Land. She's this big evangelical, and her doctor told her not to get the vaccine because it would kill her, and I thought, I'm just done with you. I don't need this crazy in my life. So, I don't know. They're all trying to take us back. I still say to the Middle Ages that they seem to like that period. And it just doesn't do anything for me because I've researched it, and I don't think it's what they really want, but they're not real smart. And, actions have consequences, and they don't get it.
There you go.
So you have a good evening.
Thank you so much, Alice. I appreciate it. No, but like I said earlier, the sad reality is the policies that they're pushing on us are all mean-spirited and destructive. I'm someone who wants to look ahead and how do we make people's lives better? How do we make sure that people are able to pursue their happiness? I may not agree with it, and guess what? Here's the shocker. I don't have to. You have the right to pursue your thing. Go ahead, knock yourself out. Go your direction. I'll go mine, you go yours. We used to believe that. My grandfather always said, since I threw one quote out, he go, "Don't worry about me, worry about yourself." A generation used to think like that. And maybe we need to get some of that old wisdom back to where we worry about ourselves. We take care of ourselves and let other people lead their lives. I mean, I look at some of the stuff that Republican states are doing across this country legislatively. Are they really making people's lives better? I mean, for me, the idea of using governmental power is to improve things. Again, fix problems in a way that don't create larger additional ones. Actually have solutions. Don't create bigger ones. Don't create bigger problems. I know it's difficult. I get it. It's a little difficult. But I think we can do it. We've done it in the past. I think we can do it again. Love to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Again, if you've joined us late, make sure you grab the podcast. Never missed a moment. We'll take a quick break. When we come back, parent spies. They're recruiting them. Back after this.
I got nowhere to go now. I got no house. I got no nothing.
Catastrophic rains and floods kill hundreds in South Africa.
I'm here today because homegrown biofuels have a role to play right now.
Biden waives summer ban on ethanol to combat high gas prices. Plus, the climate crisis is supercharging hurricane rainfall.
All of those super stories and more straight ahead from BradBlog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
You will never hear a Republican who complains about how much we have to pay for gasoline ever complain about Jared Kushner getting $2 billion in oil profit money from Saudi Arabia.
Well, that's because they don't actually care about gas prices, and they're jealous of Jared. Now, what was that whole thing about $10,000 and Hunter Biden again? This is your Green News Report.
$2 billion in oil profit money from Saudi Arabia.
Okay, Desi Doyen, the climate crisis devastation continues, doesn't it?
Yes, unfortunately it does. Rescue and evacuation operations are underway in Durban, South Africa, after days of torrential rains and floods washed away roads and bridges and destroyed homes and vital infrastructure, killing at least 300 people. Oh. This latest weather disaster comes not long after other parts of southern Africa were devastated by 5 powerful tropical storms in just 6 weeks earlier this year. In a new study out this week, scientists from the World Weather Attribution Project, which analyzes the influence of climate change on extreme weather events, confirmed that climate change made those storms more intense and damaging.
Gosh, I wish we had more studies on all of this.
Climate change also made the record-breaking 2020 Atlantic hurricane season even worse. A new study in Nature Communications finds clear evidence that ocean warming is driving Atlantic hurricanes to produce more rainfall and to become more intense. This was the first study to look at an entire hurricane season rather than just single storms. The researchers found that during the entire record season of 30 named storms, human-caused global warming supercharged hourly rainfall rates in tropical storms and hurricanes by as much as 11%. One researcher warned, quote, "This isn't an end-of-the-century thing that we have to worry about. We actually have to prepare our coastlines for the changes in these storms now."
What, because climate change is happening right now?
Yes, that's exactly what he means. In other news, the spike in U.S. gasoline prices and other fossil fuel commodities, caused in part by Russia's invasion of Ukraine, are a key reason that domestic inflation is rising. To help lower gas prices, the Biden Environmental Protection Agency this week issued a temporary waiver to the Clean Air Act to allow gasoline known as E15, which is blended with 15% ethanol made from corn, to be sold in summer months to increase supply. The administration estimates that will bring down gas prices by about 10 cents per gallon where it is sold. Here's President Biden at an ethanol plant in Iowa.
Your family budget, your ability to fill up your tank, none of it should hinge on whether a dictator declares war and commits genocide half a world away.
Now, it's a win for farm state lawmakers, but the temporary waiver is controversial because burning E15 gas in summer months increases polluting smog, and it could encourage more fossil fuel consumption.
You know what else would help?
What?
Don't we have war profiteering laws on the books anymore? Sure would like to see some of those brought against big oil.
Well, high gas prices have political impacts for congressional Democrats who warn that if Republicans win control of Congress in the November midterm elections, that will effectively mean the end of U.S. climate policy.
Yeah, and maybe the end of democracy, but that's a whole different story.
Another major energy company is moving to exit Russia to stop funding the war on Ukraine.
Rexit?
Bloomberg News reports that Vitol Group, the world's largest independent oil trader, will stop trading Russian crude oil and products as its existing contracts expire by the end of this year and will not enter into any new transactions with Russia.
Good.
Some good news. Japanese car maker Honda announced this week it will try to catch up to other global car makers consumers by pouring $40 billion into electrifying its lineup with the target of launching 30 EV models globally by 2030. And finally, the U.S. has hit a wind energy milestone. In the first week of April, wind power was the second largest source of electricity in the United States for the first time ever.
Nice.
That's according to the Federal Energy Information Administration. Wind energy edged out electricity generated by nuclear and coal in the nation's electricity mix, but still trailed behind natural gas.
I didn't even know we had a Federal Energy Information Administration.
And now you know.
For much more on all of those stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com.
Are you tired of think tank approved corporate news and commentary? Are you tired of CEOs telling you what to think, who to hate, and who to vote for? Well, welcome to the Rick Smith Show. We don't take orders from some boardroom, and we don't do focus groups or talking points. We don't work for them, and we never will. I'm Rick Smith, and I work for you. Join us daily at thericksmithshow.com and download the podcast and never miss a minute.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So I saw probably one of the crazier stories I've seen in a while on the education front. Now understand, I believe education is the battlefront that conservatives are, where they're waging war on families. All the stuff you're hearing about, the theory about race that's critical. You're hearing about all of the, they're indoctrinating our children. It's none of that nonsense. If you talk to actual teachers and parents who have kids actually in school, none of this stuff is happening. It's all hysterics. It's all hair on fire kind of stuff. And it's all organizing attempts to get ideologically crazy people all on the same page and attacking public education. So when I saw this Pennsylvania Family Institute evidently recruiting people to be basically spies, there'd be spies on teachers and spies on education, I said, well, I think we better talk a little bit about it. And that's why I asked my good friend Cyril Michaleko to come talk with us. Cyril is the editor-in-chief of the Bucks County Beacon, where he also writes a bi-weekly column for Gannett's Bucks County Courier-Times and the Intelligencer newspapers. Cyril, thanks for taking time for us.
It's good to be back, Rick.
So am I getting this right? There's this organization out there. They're out there organizing little spies to go spy on their kids, on people's public school teachers, because I can't imagine that there are many parents who are pining for this. Because, well, am I getting this right? That this is the recruitment pitch?
Yeah, I mean that's what the Pennsylvania Family Institute announced on its website March 31st, that they were launching this incident report. And what they're doing is they're encouraging students, parents, and teachers to report on so-called political, sexual, or racist ideological indoctrination happening in public schools. It's really disturbing because, again, and we've seen this like all across the country and up and down Bucks County, is like they're using really dangerous language, right? They're suggesting that teachers and administrators are using coercion or quote unquote grooming techniques to kind of seduce these children based on books that kind of fall out of their, rigid puritanical purview. And so this isn't new for Pennsylvania, right? So I just this month as well, it came out that Representative Barbara Gleim posted on a Moms for Liberty Facebook page recruiting conservative spies to infiltrate public schools by applying to be substitute teachers. Her exact words were, "We need conservative eyes and ears in the schools," right?
Yeah, Barbara Gleim is my state representative. And I remember the bill, Cyril. It's one of those things that, she, quite frankly, again, the ideology of putting these people in these classrooms to do just that, to be the eyes and ears, to be the spies, to be the people who are in front of the classroom and pushing their ideology, pushing their belief structure. And it's scary stuff. I mean, and the really bizarre part of this, and I think we've lost Cyril in this. The really weird part of this is they don't seem to run out of resources when they do this. They don't seem to run out of the money that it takes to do this kind of stuff. That they have, all of this wealth, they have all of this cash to organize and to do this stuff, and it's frightening. And we got Cyril back. I mean, to me, Cyril, it's frightening that they've got all of this resource to be able to do this stuff.
Yeah, not only that, but they have the foot soldiers who are activated not only like on these school boards, right, but in the public, and we're seeing some like really dangerous ideas like being kind of pushed out at these school board meetings in Bucks County, which again is kind of like a microcosm for the school board wars happening across the country. I mean, in Council Rock School District, we had a parent suggest to the district that books be kept behind locked doors, right? We had a school board member actually float the idea that was, as of now, like parents can actually like exclude their kids from like reading certain books that they don't want them to read, right? So, but that's not good enough for him. He wants parents to actually provide librarians with the books that they want them to read, which is, creates such a logistical mess, never mind like how insane that sounds. And, he also suggested that books be rated like movies, like rated R or rated X. It's becoming a really slippery slope. I mean, a lot of this is around like LGBTQ issues, but like, as we've talked about before, and you've talked about with other guests, it's also about, teaching the history of, America's struggle to overcome racism, which is a kind of an ongoing struggle that we're making progress on, but it seems like they're trying to halt that, if not roll it back. And then where does it end? This September is like the 125th anniversary of the Latimer massacre, where like police, acting at the behest of Big Coal, massacred a bunch of like immigrant coal miners. So is that teaching, if this was taught in a history class, if they're talking about labor history, is this teaching kids to hate police because the police were working for Big Coal and massacring immigrants? Is that teaching them that all police are xenophobic? Like, where does this end?
Yeah, it's. I don't. There's part of me that goes, Cyril, that it's not really even about these issues. It's about destroying public education. I think the people at the top understand, and the moneyed people understand, the goal really isn't about what we're talking about. It's not about the books. It's not about the education. It's not about even the ideology. It's purely about destroying public education and then taking that over and the money that comes with it. For me, this is a power grab. This is a money grab. But for the people that they've activated, for the Q kooks and for these ideologues, this is very real. And this is where the danger comes in, because these are true believers. The people who would sign up for this stuff, they truly believe their children are under attack, even though there's no evidence to support their claims. They still believe it, and they're frightening.
No, absolutely. I mean, and just like with the Pennsylvania Family Institute and these other parents, like when you're using words like grooming, like if parents actually believe that their kids are being groomed, I mean, you're just creating a tinderbox where like violence, actual violence, if not death, is just one spark away.
Yep.
It just takes one loon to follow through with this.
No, I mean, if you want to talk about grooming, I mean, I look at Tennessee. You had that state representative who ended up marrying a girl who was a recipient of his college scholarship when she was in high school. And you go, oh, wait a second, you're like 25 years older than her. I'm missing. That's grooming. And I guess this is where you go, I always come back to this basic idea, Cyril, that when someone's pointing their finger at you and accusing you of doing something, chances are they're the ones doing it. Kind of, you look at the big lie. You know, they're saying, look, the Democrats are stealing elections. Republicans have been doing this stuff for years and getting away with it. And this is kind of in that world for me.
No, I mean, absolutely. I think a lot of times they're projecting. But, you know, I think like what you said earlier is like a really important point. Like, you know, this is a Trojan horse to destroy public education from within. That's what they want. And I think like the problem a lot of like parents face is, you know, do we leave and retreat and like move somewhere else, or do you stand your ground and just kind of like fight to save the soul of public education, not just in your district, but in your country? And, you know, I'm sure a lot of people are exhausted by this, but, you know, we are seeing people, parents in Bucks County on the ground organizing in the run-up to meetings to kind of counter this you know, hysteria, as you labeled it, this moral panic that they're trying to drum up, and just kind of, you know, hitting back with like facts, right? And saying like, hey, there's these librarians and these teachers are trained professionals, right? And there's like the American Association of School Librarians who put these books into categories and determine like which ones are age appropriate. And then again, just like, parents, if they want, they can exclude their children from reading certain books or certain materials. But that's not good enough for them. They want to impose their kind of like rigid puritanical morality on everyone. And this isn't this isn't new in the country. Like, you know, under the rubric of parents' rights, you know, this parents' rights movement has often been on the wrong side of history. And it dates back to when public education, compulsory public education, was introduced in the country. You had parents pushing back against that. And then a couple decades later, you had parents in the name of parental rights pushing back against their kids, the students being taught evolution in science class, right? With the Scopes trial.
Right.
And then it was parents' rights, right? Again, it was these parents that were against desegregation of our schools. Right. So like what we're seeing now is just a continuation of that reactionary legacy in history in our country.
Now, you're listening to the Rick Smith Show. We're with Cyril Michaleko. Cyril is the editor-in-chief of the Bucks County Beacon. He also writes a bi-weekly column for Gannett's Bucks County Courier-Times and the Intelligencer newspapers. You can check out his work. We'll get links out on social media. Now, you've said that you've got some of the parents who are organizing on the crazy side. Has this, you know, spurred a growth on the other side of the sane people going, wait a second, crazy people, no, you're not going to destroy our public schools? Has this generated some of that activity? Because, you know, like I've said in the past, I'm a believer in free speech. I think more speech is good. I think when someone says something crazy, I think sane people need to call that out. Are you seeing that, or are you seeing the other side and people being on the, well, I'd rather be safe than sorry kind of, yeah, let's get all those bad books out. Let's burn those. Let's ban them, whatever. Where do you see this going?
No, absolutely. You know, parents are at the grassroots level responding. They're organizing in their communities. They're showing up because they recognize that, you know, this is like a pivotal moment in, you know, our country's history. I think the thing is that the Republican Party has weaponized, you know, this whole ordeal. And I think, you know, the Democratic Party, I don't really see them kind of like as an institution really kind of engaging itself on this level. And so that I'm hoping like that's something that changes in the near future. But, you know, even just like this, a couple of weeks ago, there was like a congressional hearing, free speech under attack, book bans and academic censorship. So we had a local Bucks County parent go to Congress and testify before Congress, Mindy Freeman, who's from Central Bucks School District, talking about the importance of having like a diverse range of books and what that meant for her daughter who is trans. And then a librarian from Lancaster County also testified. And this is an area where actually administrators were quietly and without due process, and even beyond quietly, like covertly or secretly, like pulling books from library shelves, right? So, it's good that these, the librarian who spoke out, Samantha Hall, and Mindy Freeman are speaking out. I'm just wondering at what point, do like teachers engage, right? Or even the teachers union, do they engage? I recognize that, teachers are kind of like worried about their jobs, and they're worried about these like fanatics, and what they're capable of if they think they're like grooming their child because, there's a book in the classroom called Heather Has Two Mommies. So, that's something else that we have to be aware of. And, the fact that, we were talking about this earlier before I came on, is just like in Central Bucks School District, administrators at the local high school canceled a planned production for the play Rent, right? And according to the students who were interviewed by the Philadelphia Inquirer, the principal at the school said administrators were worried about how the community would receive this play. So what we're seeing is that they've created this atmosphere of fear, right? Where now teachers and administrators are starting to self-censor. And that's really dangerous.
No, we're heading into really crazy times. Horrible stuff. Cyril, I appreciate you sharing some of this stuff with us. I hope folks are going to be on the lookout for this stuff in their neck of the woods. Keep up the great reporting. You're on top of all this, and I hope you'll come back and share some more with us as the insanity continues.
Thanks. I definitely will, Rick.
Good stuff. I appreciate it. Cyril Michaleko, he is the editor-in-chief there at the Bucks County Beacon. Make sure you check out the work that he does. We'll get some links out on social media. Love to hear your thoughts. 1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. This is The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk. If you're a fan of the show, you've heard our labor history in 2 segments, and you can hear them on the radio pretty much anywhere in the U.S. Labor history has never been more important than it is right now. So here's what we'd like you to do. Tell a teacher. Tell a teacher that labor history is important and that they can get digestible 2-minute lessons that are absolutely free. Free to download, free to use, free to share. Tell a teacher to go to thericksmithshow.com/history and help us put labor back where it belongs, in the classroom. Generations of American workers fought, bled, and died to build the American way of life. It's our job to keep their stories alive. Go tell a teacher that we're here to help them do just that. Find us at thericksmithshow.com/history today.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
I tell you, scary stuff. You listen to Cyril there, and you hear the amount of money. I mean, the money that these organizations raise to put these groups together. And look, these church groups that come together because they're fighting the good fight. It's frightening the wrong direction they want to take us. And as I think Cyril hit it on the head, all of these kind of movements, you look back 20 years on the wrong side of history. Not surprising at all that. And look, my state representative at the front of it, because an ideologue. Because there's no competition in this area for ideas. This is where I live is a 65-35 district. It is going to be however far to the extreme right you can possibly get. And ideologically so. because we've drawn these cute little maps. This is what gerrymandering gets you. Extremism. And extremism is dangerous. Anyway, some good news coming out of the Biden administration. They're looking to expand access to some debt forgiveness for, they're saying about 3.6 million people as they extend the moratorium on payments, as they're trying to get to a place where they can do some more debt forgiveness. The existing program has millions of people enrolled in it. They're trying to extend this program through August 31st because of the pandemic. Now, there's been a pause on payments. The longer this goes, the better it's going to be for folks, because evidently, and I didn't know this entirely. I thought it was just for teachers, but there are a number of jobs and a number of occupations where, if you had student loan debts, that there's X amount of time for repayment. You pay a certain percentage back over X amount of time. I've heard 10, I've heard 20, I've heard 25 years. And then the balance is forgiven. And there's part of me goes that this is the way forward. I've had a couple of really heated discussions with people about, you want debt forgiveness. I'm going, no, I understand that if you wipe away all of the debt, that you're going to create some intergenerational jealousy. I get that. I also understand that you can't really do anything on the debt problem right now until you solve the future of it. I mean, you can't pick winners today and go, hey, next generation, sorry, but you're screwed. Because we'll kick it down the road for the next person or three people down. I don't know that you can do that. I think you have to solve the bigger problem. Again, when you solve a problem, make sure you're not creating other ones. And I think, I think Biden's trying to do this in a way that doesn't create more. There's a debt forgiveness process in place, from what I understand. This is where they're moving. Evidently, there's around 3.6 million people who are already in this program, that if they lengthen it out a little bit, it's going to help get them off. That's a start. Not nearly big enough, but it is a start. Now, I did have some weirdo tell me that Biden not making people pay their student loans back during this pandemic part. And remember, Trump did it too. But because Biden did it, this is what's led to all this inflation. And the rationale was interesting, kind of cute, but interesting. All of these people now have income that they didn't have before, and they're spending on other things other than student loans, like food and housing and paying off their car debts and other things. And, maybe new clothes, maybe something else. Who knows? Maybe putting a little money away in a savings account. But according to him, this was the driver of the inflation. And I'm going, really? A generation of people who had never had, really disposable income, having a little bit now, that's what's causing us to suffer under this crushing inflation that corporate America has heaped upon us. Now understand, inflation it hurts the working poor overwhelmingly, and it hurts the middle class. The middle class who was doing pretty well, now they're at the beginning of struggle. Because there's a bunch of wealth now going away. That extra $350 a month that it's costing to just have the standard of living you had a couple of years ago, when wages haven't really jumped enough, there's a problem. Now the answer here, raise the minimum wage, raise it significantly, and then have that bump up so everyone gets a raise upward, and also stop buying so much stuff. Show corporate America, look, if you're going to raise prices, we ain't buying it. Because what's happening, and I don't think it takes a rocket scientist to figure this out. Corporate profits are a 50-year high. Corporate profits are at a 50-year high. CEO pay up 31% last year, according to statistics. They're doing really well. Massive stock buybacks, more for shareholders. The top of our scale doing really well. Thank you very much. Who's not? The working poor, the working class. They're struggling. So when inflation happens, the rich do really well. Who struggles? The working class. Also people who do well, people who are in debt. because their wages go up, their debt stays the same. That's helpful a little bit to people in the middle. But the working poor who are renting, see their rents go skyrocketing, they really do struggle. And we are in that moment. So we need to do something about it. That's why I think we need to raise the minimum wage. We need windfall profit tax on oil companies. We need to do a lot of stuff. Just my thought. Love to hear yours. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Grab the podcast while you're at it. Quick break. Back after this. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1912. That was a day of tragedy for workers in the gold fields of Serbia. Gold miners by the Lena River in southeast Serbia worked under brutal conditions. The Lena Gold Mining Joint Stock Company ran the mining operation. The lucrative gold mines lined the pockets of shareholders, including Russian aristocrats and British industrialists. But the workers saw very little of the bounty they mined. They toiled for 16 hours a day for low wages. To make matters worse, workers were often paid in coupons they could cash in for food at the company store. The quality of the food was poor. A staggering 700 accidents occurred for every 1,000 workers in the mines. At the end of February, when one group of workers was given rancid meat, they had finally had enough. The workers walked out on strike. Soon they were joined by thousands of their comrades. They formed a strike committee and demanded an 8-hour day, 30% wage increase, better food, and improved workplace conditions. At first, the company agreed to talk to the workers, but negotiations went nowhere. Troops were called in and arrested the entire strike committee. Workers rallied to demand the release of their leaders. A crowd of 2,500 striking workers gathered. The troops fired into the unarmed crowd, wounding an estimated 500 workers and killing more than 250. As outraged workers across the country learned of the massacre, a wave of workers' strikes and protests swept throughout Russia. On May Day, 300,000 workers marched in the streets for the 8-hour day. The gold miners continued their strike throughout the summer, but to no avail. Thousands eventually left the gold fields to find less brutal work elsewhere.
What is so supreme about the Supreme Court? I mean, besides being housed in an imposing marble building, being the final stop on America's judicial train, and having its 9 members look photogenically authoritarian in those full-body black robes. And yes, its existence is written into the Constitution. But so is Congress, and no one thinks of it as anything supreme. We 330 million Americans are told we must obey the law as defined by a half-dozen unelected lawyers on this court. Why should we democratic citizens do that? After all, these legalistic elites have no actual power to force their personal beliefs on us. There's no Supreme Court army. In fact, their sole source of power is one that is intangible, extremely fragile, and easily frittered away: public trust. We should go along with their rulings only if they appear to be fair and honest, not based on personal whim or partisan ideology, and not meant to extend plutocratic power over the people. As Justice Elena Kagan rightly put it, the only way we can get people to do what we think they should do is because people respect us. That's where the present majority of far-right-wing appointees have failed so abjectly. Rather than meeting a lofty standard of judiciousness, all 6 have pulled the court down into the mire of crass Republican politics. They've corrupted the system and jiggered the law to decree that corporate campaign cash is free speech, that the state can take over women's bodies, that the Republican Party can unilaterally shut millions of voters out of America's voting booths, and so awful much more that enthrones the few over the many. This is Jim Hightower saying, respect? Trust? The Republican court is already down to 40% public approval rating, having surrendered its legitimacy to be a governing authority over us.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
there's a great story over at Vice written by a guy named Aaron Gordon, and I reached out to him. We're going to try and get him on the program to talk about this. And not new. What he's written, the stuff we've talked about for years here on the program, that these freight train conductors, these BNSF freight train conductors, that their schedules are so erratic. They've gone to a new way of calling people. They've gone to a new way of not scheduling, and it's wreaking havoc on the workforce. And it's unsafe. Look, I was on call for 11 years. There's nothing safe about being on call because you can sit and wait, all day long, right about the time you're ready to go to bed, the phone rings, and now you're going to be up for 12, 14, 15 hours. And in this case, there's nowhere to go. And the other beautiful part is the freight industry, the train people, they don't want two people on a train anymore. They want to go to one. So this guy's story saying that how some of these people fell asleep while at work doesn't give me a warm, fuzzy feeling. Not at all. And look, it's not the workers' fault. Not the workers' fault. They're not to blame in this. The crummy system, our failed labor laws, and the power we give these employers. That is who we are to blame. And here to share some thoughts on this and what's going on in the freight world, I've asked our good friend Greg Regan to come talk with us. Greg is the president of the Transportation Trades Department over at the AFL-CIO. Greg, thanks for taking time for us.
Thank you, Rick. Happy to be here.
So, I'm looking at this. Let's start with this first because, I'm looking at this. This isn't a new story. You know it. I know it. We all know it. This high-vis program they've got of scoring points on whether you're available or you need a couple extra hours to go to a doctor appointment or, heaven forbid, your kid's birthday party or, hey, you just need to get a little rest. Unworkable, not family-friendly, and certainly not personal-friendly. But this is the kind of stuff these employers have been getting away with for far too long. Maybe they should have a union.
Yeah, well, they do, and we're fighting hard against it. And what we're seeing right now with BNSF is only the latest in a long line of these types of draconian attendance policies that put safety last and the workers last, all in the name of profits. And let's be completely honest about that. I've talked to members already who have said that they see no scenario where they still have a job in 8 months because of the way this point system works. And this person has, a veteran with PTSD, also has a sick mother who he needs to take care of. These are all excused absences, whether it be medical or FMLA or whatever it may be, but they still get penalized for it. And when you get penalized enough for excused absences, you're going to get suspended. And if you get suspended again, and then the third time, you're going to get fired. So it's outrageous. And, especially during a pandemic, which is still going on, by the way, if you're going to get punished for taking a sick day rather than risk getting your coworkers sick, that's a problem.
Yeah, but this tells me a couple of things. One, we've given way too much power to these employers. And two, maybe they need to hire some more people so that maybe these aren't, I don't know, jobs that are so erratically scheduled. Now, here's maybe a better idea. Maybe since you're the freaking railroad, maybe you can run on time. Maybe you can figure out how in a window, maybe a couple hours, one way or another, you can figure this out so people's lives aren't sitting around waiting for you to decide. Hey, yeah, well, it showed up. We couldn't figure it out. We got computers, we got smart people, but gee, we just couldn't figure it out. We got to call you at the last minute.
Yeah, and you really hit the nail on the head there when it comes to hiring more people. They, in the 5 years before the pandemic, leading up to the pandemic, the big four freight railroads fired 20% of their workforce. 20%. And that's not because they were struggling financially, they didn't have work to do. They were trying to trim every bit of overhead they could in order to make the most profits in the short term. And now, when we see increased demand for freight, when we see when we have a pandemic hit, all of a sudden they're scrambling saying, well, we don't have the workers. So they're trying to solve a problem that they created by instituting policies like this attendance policy to try to make sure that they can wring every last hour out of their employees without any regard for what they did to put us in the situation in the first place.
So what's it going to take? I mean, I listened to I'm reading this story and the guy said, look, I fell asleep. I was up all this time. I didn't want to. Look, the train's going back and forth, and look, I've been on a train. I love it. It's a nice rocking feeling. You kind of get sleepy. You're gonna lull out, and if you've been up, a day and a half, whatever it's gonna be, it's natural that especially if you can't have music or you can't have any distractions whatsoever, you can't have anything to help keep you awake. And there's obviously only one guy on the train, and if he's in the same boat, you're possibly both gonna fall asleep. I don't know that that's a good thing for public safety. Is it gonna take, I don't know, some massive tragedy to bring attention to this? Or is this going to be enough? Someone saying, look, this happened. We lucked out. Nothing bad happened. But hey, warning sign, big flashing yellow, red lights. Maybe an arm comes down across the road, says, don't cross here. Something like, I don't know, like the railroad has before you cross over those tracks.
Yeah. There are a number of things that need to happen. First of all, you've pointed out the safety concerns here, and not only just for the people, the workers who are conducting the trains, but also for the communities through which they travel. I mean, they go through every single community in this country, and if something happens, and if you're hauling a 3-mile train with hazardous materials or fuel or fertilizer, and something goes wrong, the consequences can be catastrophic. So we need to make sure that the Federal Railroad Administration is actually taking a strong look at the safety ramifications of all this stuff, and I know that they are. We also have a hearing coming up next week with the Surface Transportation Board, which its roots go back to the Teddy Roosevelt administration, which used to be the Interstate Commerce Commission back in the day. And they're looking at whether this is going to be, whether the freight railroads are fulfilling their constitutional common carrier obligations, which means they have to provide a fair rate or a reasonable rate and a reasonable service. So I'll be there to testify. And what's unique about this, actually, for the first time that I can remember, the companies who rely and the organizations that rely on freight railroad for transporting their goods, the grain and feed people, the fertilizer manufacturers, agricultural community, they're speaking out and saying, we're not getting any service here. And if we start seeing food shortages, we can blame the railroads. They're pointing out directly that they don't have reasonable service, and they're pointing to furloughs as one of the key problems there. So if we get the rest of the country, the rest of the communities out there talking about how these guys are screwing us over, I think we're going to start to make some headwinds here.
Well, I hope so, because, look at this. I remember back when we did our labor history tour back in 2013. This was an issue that they were raising back then. The idea of going away from multiple people on a train. They wanted to go down to from 2 people down to 1-person trains. I'm going, really? How's that? I remember when I was a kid, there were multiple people on a train. They had someone at the front, someone at the back, someone they had people, if something went wrong, that they were there. They had someone to help keep you stay awake, so that maybe, I don't know, the guy at the throttle wasn't falling asleep going through town. It happens. They're human.
Yep.
Again, I come back to, is the greed that important? And is the bottom line that important to the folks at the top? And I guess maybe it is. And I'm hoping you're right. I'm hoping people are paying attention, because I'm looking at the inflation that's happening across this country, and the inflation's real, and it's harming working class people. And yet we seem to be blaming the wrong person. Everyone's blaming, everywhere I look, it's Joe Biden's fault. Joe Biden's fault. The sad reality is I keep looking, our CEO pay is going through the roof. Shareholders are really happy. Massive numbers of stock buybacks. 50-year high for corporate profits. There might be something over there that maybe we're not quite seeing.
Yeah, and greed, I think, unfortunately, is at the crux of all of this. You can see the CEOs from BNSF talking about how they were the most profitable in the history of railroading. And they're talking about what a great thing this is. Warren Buffett's talking about how now is the time to buy into railroad stock because the profits are just soaring. Okay. Well, you're doing it at the same time you're screwing over the supply chain for the rest of the Americans. And more to the point, they're in the middle of collective bargaining with their rail unions, and they're offering them essentially net zero gains. So they're making record profits, and they're telling all their employees who keep this place running, who keep the whole system running, that you don't deserve any raise at all. That's it. So they can't afford, they can afford to do a whole lot of things, including buy back stock and pay off shareholders, but apparently they can't afford to pay their own employees what they deserve.
Well, that's not just the railroads. Look across virtually every industry, and any CEOs crying that. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show here with Greg Regan. Greg's the president of the Transportation Trades Department, AFL-CIO. TTD.org, their website. We'll get links out on social media. You can take a look at what they do. But I'm looking at this, Greg, and look, there's got to be some kind of groundswell. I look at the working conditions that these people are struggling under, and I think a lot of people are tired of the pre-pandemic lifestyle or work-life balance that we struggled with then. And I know corporate America is anxious to get us back there. This could be, I think, one of those kind of rallying cries of people going, no one should have to live the kind of life that these railroad conductors have to live. No one should be on call, 24/7. I think the guy said 90% of his life he's on call. They get virtually no time off, which is insane. Even when I was on call, and look, like I said, I was on call for 11 years. We at least got, at the end of 6 tours, we got a 48-hour off period. At least the 7 tours, you got 58 hours off. We at least had that. And if we were tired, we could go, hey, we need a slide to get some rest. Because, hey, we don't want tired truck drivers, careening down the road with 80,000 pounds. Trains are a little bit bigger than trucks. I would think that interest in safety, I would think that would be there.
Yeah, and I think it is. Unfortunately, the railroads have sort of managed to, the supply chain has gotten a lot of attention recently. Let's be honest. We saw all the ships anchored offshore at LA Long Beach. We've seen there's been a lot of focus on trucking, and rightfully so. The railroads have a huge amount of freight that they transport across our country, and their business practices have not gotten the spotlight. I'm hopeful that it's coming, both from government and from others, from conversations like this with the media, to make sure that people understand how it's impacting not just the workers, but actually everybody in this country. And, the other problem here is that the practices that they're implementing, like this attendance policy, that's driving people away from the workforce. So they can sit there and say, ignore the fact that they actually laid off 20% of their workers before the pandemic. And B, then they'll say, well, we have a workforce shortage, so we're going to have to ask you to sort of bear with us a little while. And then they're going to, rather than aggressively rehire people or make it a more appealing workplace, they're instituting policies like this that are driving people away. And it's just, at some point, there is going to be a breaking point. And, those record profits are not going to be there anymore if they can't run a railroad. Yeah. And for us, we don't want to see that happen. It used to be a really good job that people retired on. We want to see the railroads return to their former glory.
Yeah. In fact, a friend of mine, Ken Curtis, he just retired. 50 years on the railroad. He just got out of it, and good for him. He made it to the end. And I wish that for every person who works on there. These should be jobs that are careers if you want them to be. They should have good, solid, family-sustaining wages where you can actually see your family occasionally. And there should be retirement security at the end of it. It shouldn't be this difficult. So I guess the last line of questioning, how do we draw attention to this? What do we do to get politicians to pay attention and to actually make this the issue that we need it to be?
Well, like I said, for one, I think that as these supply chain issues are not going away, I think we need more from our elected officers or elected officials to highlight this as a problem. I know they know it's a problem. I've spoken to people about it and the highest level of government about how this is a major contributor to these issues. And I think they can be really effective in drawing it back to how it affects everybody else's lives. So that you start to see people who might not even realize that a train is so integral to their daily lives, who might start to care a little bit more about it. The other thing that we need to see here is, and I think that we're going to start to see this next week with the Surface Transportation Board hearing, where we are going to start holding their feet to the fire with the regulators who have the authority to do so. And we're going to go there and tell our story. The people, the organizations, the grain and feed wholesalers, they're the ones who originally filed a complaint with the SCB. They're going to tell their story. And when you start seeing everybody from labor and business pointing their fingers at where the problem is, and it's with the greedy practices of the railroads, that is going to start to turn the tide here. I really believe it. And the other thing that I think is important is that we have some agencies that can regulate them. It's, the FRA, the Federal Railroad Administration, obviously has a big role to play. The Surface Transportation Board has a big role to play from the economic side. What we're going to learn here is whether they have enough tools to properly regulate the companies. And if they don't, then it's Congress's turn. And we're going to go to Congress and say, here's a toolbox we need to deliver to regulators to make sure that these companies are delivering for the American people the way they are obligated to under our Constitution.
We need somebody to hold their feet to the fire. And because the thing is, they're wildly profitable. As you pointed out, how much is an extra person's salary in the grand scheme of things to make sure that that you don't have this? How much, it comes back to that, I guess, how much is enough? How much profit is enough? And I know the guy from Caterpillar said it's never enough. I know they want to squeeze a quarter until the eagle screams. I get that. But at some point you go, someone's life, your entire workforce. I don't know. I guess I'm struggling with it.
Rick, you and I think, have a different mindset than some of these folks.
Yeah. It just is what it is. But Greg, I appreciate the information, the input. Anything we can do, please come back and let us know. I think this is one of those important issues. And look, I'm hoping people do understand that this is a big part of our supply chain and a big reason why we're struggling with the inflation that we're struggling with. I appreciate it, Greg. Thanks so much.
Of course. Thank you.
Good stuff. Greg Regan, president of the Transportation Trades Department there of the AFL-CIO. Check out their website, ttd.org. We'll get links out at social media how you can check out the work that they do. Let's take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1995. This marks the day one of the most horrendous acts of domestic terrorism in U.S. history occurred in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. A truck bomb exploded at the Alfred P. Murrah Federal Building, killing 168 people. 99 of those killed worked for the federal government. 8 were federal law enforcement agents. Those who lost their lives worked for governmental agencies including the Secret Service, U.S. Customs, the Department of Agriculture, Drug Enforcement Administration, Department of Transportation, Army and Marine Corps Recruiting, U.S. Customs, the Social Security Administration, Housing and Urban Development, and the Federal Employee Credit Union. On that horrific day, 19 children were killed, including 15 who were at a daycare center in the building. The blast left 680 people injured and maimed. More than 300 neighboring buildings were damaged or destroyed, totaling more than $600 million in damages. In the rescue effort, more than 12,000 people participated to aid those injured in the blast and to help recover those who had died. One of the men responsible for the bombing was executed for his crime. The other received a life sentence in prison. Today, a national monument and museum honors those who died. More than 4.4 million visitors have paid their respects at the memorial. One of the prominent features of the memorial is the survivor tree. A more than 100-year-old American elm stood in the parking lot across from the building. It survived the blast, and although it lost most of its branches, the tree thrives to this day. An inscription on a wall around the tree reads, "The spirit of this city and this nation will not be defeated. Our deeply rooted faith sustains us." Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2. Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out our website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind, you can email me, Rick, at thericksmithshow.com. So, look, I was, this is one of those stories. It kind of stuck with me because I remember, look, for a large number of years, 11 years, I was on call, back before we had cell phones. I remember having a bag phone. Was the first cell phone we got. We had pagers back when and you'd get a page. And I remember, you got a 2-hour work call and you had to be there within 2 hours. or you got letters, and look, that stuff built up, and there was, you had a warning, a 1-3-5 discharge, and that's how it went. And you, in a 9-month period, you better not get up there, or you could end up losing your job. And I remember arguing back then, this is a giant, massive corporation. You're not capable to tell me, 8 hours in advance so I can get a good bit of rest? Evidently not. And we've given corporate America so much power over people's lives. And people have said, well, Rick, you could have gone and gotten another job. And that is true. And I don't complain too much about it because I made the choice to stay. And you could make the argument about these folks as well. They made the choice. Now, the difference is it wasn't always this way. This is a recent change. They used to be able to take slides, and they used to be able to, to go, hey, look, I'm fatigued, drop me down. And then the next person would come, and they would go down the list. And whoever was next, was available, they would just go through the way it should be. But they decided, no, you're going to do what we say. The Jim Cramer thing. I mean, Jim Cramer, when we're talking about Amazon unionizing, really was the quiet thing out loud. We're going to tell you what you're going to do, and you're going to like it. Because that's how we make money, by abusing you, by controlling every aspect of your existence. That's really what they're saying. And in this instance, this is what they're doing to these people. 90% of their year is consumed with waiting for a phone call or working or whatever. And you go, how is that possible? Like they just pointed out, and look, I live this. You can't go to a movie. You can't be further than 90 minutes from wherever you're going to be. Now, it's easier today because everyone's got one of these smarty phone things where they can go around and you can be contacted anywhere. Back when I was on it, there was no smartphone, and I didn't do the pager because they weren't reliable. The bag phone wasn't reliable. So you were tethered to the home phone because they called once and then they called back again to verify. And if you didn't get the second call, they dropped you and you missed a day's pay and they gave you a letter. And I understand what these guys are talking about. I understand the frustration. I understand the anger. And I understand how difficult it is. And we shouldn't allow this. But here's the thing. I've been arguing this for years, that we shouldn't allow this kind of scheduling to happen. You should be able to plan your life at least a day in advance. I would argue weeks in advance. I had someone tell me, well, you never know how freight flows are going to happen. You never know how business flows are going to happen. And you go, okay, then you make sure that you have enough people to cover what you need, and then you find things for them to do. And this is where, again, I love those conservatives go, the auto industry, they used to pay people just to sit and play cards. And you go, yeah, they did. They used to have a rubber room for people just to sit and wait. And they paid them. They paid them because they might need them. And this is where you go, this is when workers had a little bit of power. Their time wasn't wasted sitting at home waiting for a call. Their time was wasted sitting, getting paid, waiting to get something to do. And whose responsibility should it have been for them to have something to do? That's right, the company's. If the company chose to let them sit and play cards and do nothing, that's the company's responsibility. They're paying them. We've got such a screwed up mentality in this country about what work should and should not be. And this whole push to, I'm my own boss, so I get to take on all the risk and all the responsibility and not make a reasonable living. It's crazy, folks. It's literally crazy. And we seriously need, as a country, a massive attitude adjustment. We need people to come around to the reality that our lives matter. That our time is important. Our time is valuable. we absolutely, positively, without question, need to be fighting back over this stuff and standing up and organizing and coming together and saying we're not putting up with it. We're not going to take it. And I'll tell you, I'm seeing it. I'm seeing it out there. Thank you to the Amazon folks. Thank you to the Starbucks folks, the AT&T workers, the college graduates, grad students. There are a lot of folks doing it. If you missed any of the show, grab the podcast. Make sure you get that. Also, email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com, if you got something on your mind. Thanks for being here. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.